Hello, I'm Mischievous Marcinacchio, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, Amazing Fantasy number 15, and all of the annuals, which I say do not count. I also own all of the issue 5s of every volume and of all the annuals, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
How many issue 5s of the annuals are there, Mark?
I mean, there's one, and it's probably one of the few annuals that actually counts for whatever it's worth, but not all of the annuals count, so that still maintains. But issue 5 annual is the origin of Peter Parker's parents, when, you know, the great decision was made to make Peter's parents super spies, because, you know, that's exactly what an everyman character needs. But regardless, they do not count.
And it's still playing out within the pages of the new Spider-Man Wolverine comic by Mark Guggenheim. Well, anyway, I'm Dapper Dan Gavaston, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals, which, you know, just like Mark Guggenheim, clearly building stories off of it, he must think they count, so therefore I think they count. But for me, Amazing Fantasy 15 remains a fantasy.
Mark Guggenheim would be so impressed to know that he was like such an inspirational arbiter for our podcast here. Welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe. Thanks for joining us for this review episode of Amazing Spider-Man Volume 7.
Yeah, if you want to swing along with us on our journey through Spidey's past, present, and future, be sure to subscribe to Amazing Spider Talk on your favorite podcast app and leave us a review.
This podcast exists because of the support of our Patreon members. If you want to receive early reviews and seasonal episodes, exclusive podcasts, and artwork, and help us keep this podcast going ad-free, please go to AmazingSpiderTalk.com and click on the big Patreon button to sign up.
Today on the show, Mark and I are going to be discussing Amazing Spider-Man Volume 7, Number 5. This issue was written by Joe Kelly. The cover features artwork by Pepe Larraz and Marte Gracia. The interior pages feature artwork by Pepe Larraz, colors by Marte Gracia, and of course, letters by VC's Joe Caramagna. This issue was first released on June 4th, 2025. Mark, why don't you hit us with a recap of the events of Amazing Spider-Man Volume 7, Number 5.
Gladly, Dan. Rand Enterprises is on fire in Fuego, and the Hobgoblin is here to cut some heads off of some nosy scientists for interfering with his master plans to create anxiety in a can with Queen's Cola. I got the cola brand right this time. One of Hobgoblin's guys was planted in the FBI's. There are no feds coming to save them, but before he can finish the job, Spider-Man comes crashing through the window, and the two throw down. Hobgoblin taunts Spider-Man that two more innocent deaths will be on his head, but in fact, he is slowed down by some well-placed webbing in his giant wings. That gives Spider-Man time to spell out the Hobgoblin's plan. Anxiety in a can, and then phase 2, Hobgoblin markets the cure. It sounds like he's on the right track, but Hobgoblin gets the upper hand on Spider-Man, which allows him to get back in pursuit of Brian and Dr. Osmani. But Spider-Man catches up, which also gives us a flashback where Peter shows up to save Brian and the Fantastic Four, despite being told they couldn't hang out anymore because they got each other's backs. Oh, the good vibes, they continue here. In the present day, Brian appears with a mushroom, and guess what? It's not his supervillain origin just yet. He throws the mushroom, which leads to a Joe Kelly Mario Kart joke. Still relevant, fortunately, because Nintendo just won't let go of its classic IPs, much in the way that Marvel Comics won't. And, you know, Switch 2 came out this week, Mario Kart World. I did not buy it. We will not talk about video games today, Dan, but I'm just saying. Anyway, the mushroom drugs Hobgoblin and makes him hallucinate spiders, opening him up to some Spidey fists of justice. The Hobgoblin runs away, Spidey and Brian share a selfie, and it's a big win for the web slinger. Flash forward, Peter is recapping to his best buddy in the universe, Norman Osborn, and even Peter is like, "Hey Norman, the cadence of your voice is super duper creepy," as he promises Peter that destroying Roderick Kingsley and anyone who might be working with him is part of his legacy of atonement for the Green Goblin's actions. I mean, whew. So Peter pokes his head into the other room, and Aunt May is slaving over Is an empty pot? I mean, seriously. I mean, Pepe Larraz couldn't even like draw some like wavy heat lines over the pot, or like put some liquid in the spoon. Like, is Peter still tripping? Am I tripping? Am I making this up, Dan? It's an empty pot with nothing in the spoon, right?
I had to double check it when I read this, Mark, and you're dead right. It is an empty pot. There's like a white glow. This is the closest, Mark, you've ever looked at art in the 13 years that we've been doing this show.
Because it's food, Dan, and I want to know what's in the pot. What's in the pot? Anyway.
I'm very aware.
That leads to Peter and May sharing a nice moment, this time in the present day, with a flash over to Uncle Ben's jacket. And wow, we're like tying everything together when concluding an arc in Amazing Spider-Man. Now I must be tripping, right?
Yes. Which brings us, I think, really beautifully to a good place to start this conversation, which is, Mark, you have been super reluctant to really kind of jump in with any kind of like excitement or like full-throated endorsement of this run until they finish a story, right? So you could see that they just aren't up to their normal tricks and falling apart at the very end. I think based on your recap here, I think we could kind of guess where you land on this one. But tell me about your thoughts about the conclusion here and if it has kind of changed you in any way in regards to your approach moving forward.
I mean, look, it's changed me in that I feel they have landed the plane in this one arc. I mean, it's still early and there's still plenty of time for some disappointment in the world of Amazing Spider-Man in terms of where this all might be going down the line. But like, I think we talked about this in the last episode. As much as I enjoyed the very first Zeb Wells arc with Tombstone a couple of years ago when that kicked off Volume 6, I think overall, pound for pound, page for page, this opening arc to Volume 7 was much stronger. Just because like I feel like it didn't have any of the baggage of like the MJ stuff and like what's with the the mystery box and all this kind of stuff. I mean, this is just straightforward Spider-Man storytelling where through 5 chapters we progressed. We didn't take any like dramatic leaps of faith. There were mysteries that were presented and resolved. And I guess if I had kind of complain, it was just that the Hobgoblin runs away at the end. Like I guess we don't necessarily get that wrapped up in a neat little bow per se. I mean, it's just Hobgoblin's still out there to cause trouble. Not that he wouldn't have been even if Spider-Man apprehended him, but you know how it goes. But like overall, this was like and then they tie it all together in the end where like they made the flashbacks pay off in the present tense, and then we even get the visual of Ben's jacket at the end. I mean, it's like, wow, like we're telling stories and doing it competently here. I mean, this is good stuff. I mean, this is what this comic should be. So I am in a very happy place in terms of Amazing Spider-Man land right now.
Yeah, and I issued a sort of like a challenge to the team last review episode where I said, it's great if you can make all these emotional scenes in the past, but can you do it in the present, right? Can you show that these characters are able to grow and reflect? Now, I don't know if we've yet seen any major changes, right. With these characters, but I do think that they crafted some emotional scenes in the present that could lead us to some major changes. Now, I don't need every status quo to be upended. In fact, I would prefer that not happen. But I do think that we saw a meaningful growth from the story that was included here. And I can't say that that's happened many times in the past decade of Amazing Spider-Man comics that we've been covering on this show. And I found that not only like satisfying as a reader, but like really fun to read. I feel like I'm caught up in the adventures of Peter Parker in a way that I haven't been in a very long time. And this conclusion really shows that they're looking to do that, at least for this arc. We've seen a lot of great first arcs that then don't, give way to a follow-up. But like, What's different this time to me is I feel like this arc isn't promising me anything that I don't think it can deliver on yet. There's no mystery box. There's no big tantalizing thing. There's no villain that's creeping in from the background. Even Hellgate is going to show up for 2 issues or something, in the next couple of issues with JRJR. And maybe that gets into sort of the mystery box stuff that I won't like. But for now, with this arc, it feels really contained. And yeah, okay, Hobgoblin got away, but how many Spider-Man stories do we read where the villain just gets away at the end and is going to come back in the next one? Yeah.
I'm not giving full demerits for that. I was just saying
no, I know you're not.
Like just one nitpick. But yeah, I mean, look, like it boils down to this, Dan. Like this is the most I have cared about Peter and his supporting cast in an arc, over the duration of an arc in quite some time, and it is written in the style to make me want to care. Like like it's not even just like, oh, Peter and Aunt May had a sweet moment. It's like, like this isn't like, again, I think the best comparison is what we got with the first Zeb arc a couple of years ago, which was like, so much of that was like, well, how did Peter screw up? Like, and even like his the reveal with Tombstone, it was, Peter getting suckered by Tombstone and kind of like the pleasure of that reveal, like, oh wow, they really got us, you know what I mean? But like, this was just like Peter, like, the odds are against him because he's been drugged, and everyone is counting him out because he's just gone cuckoo bananas and all this kind of stuff, and yet he rises to the occasion. He gets an assist from his friend, but like it's not like the story is not written in the fashion like, well, good thing Brian showed up or Peter would have lost that fight for sure. You know what I mean? Like it was kind of paying off the Freaktastic Four. We have each other's backs, even if Brian didn't realize Spider-Man was Peter. You know what I mean? Like it's tying things together, and then tying things together with May, and like, the word I think I used all the way back in the Death of Miss Marvel issue was the word of joy. And like, this is just a very joyful story. This is a joyful Spider-Man story. Like this is what the book has just been lacking with any real consistency for so long now. Like, is this revolutionary status quo shifting stuff? No, but like, these are the comics I like to read, like that's the bottom line. I like this.
This is what Spider-Man was built on for decades.
These comics make me feel good about reading Amazing Spider-Man. Like I feel like this is worth the investment in time and money, because it's like, okay, I feel good. I just have a good feeling, a good warm feeling flushing over me as I'm reading these books right now. And that's like, is that something that I should be like elevating? I don't know, but again, we just haven't gotten it in a consistently over a long time. And like, 5 issues in a row, I think that's consistent now. I mean, let's see what the second arc brings in Hellgate, but that's a very good showing for where this book has been the last couple of years.
Yeah, and you mentioned the joy element of it. Like, it was really fun to just see Spider-Man get a clean win.
Yep.
Okay, yes, he may have, like, I guess 1 in 8 deaths of Spider-Man, but that didn't ever really feel on his terms. And even then, like, the Juggernaut thing was not really his choice. He just got powered up and I guess chose to take the world on his shoulders. But, like, this is just a classic Spider-Man, good old-fashioned win without even the Ditko Peter walking away as the curtains close, motif. You got to give people a win every now and again.
He was dead in 8 Deaths of Spider-Man, and it was what, Syra, or I already forgotten her name. Who spared him and gave him the ability to get the win, and then it was reviving people who were, his closest loved ones who were dead, which is kind of like they're alive again. You know what I mean? this is not that by a lot. Like okay. That was a win by the strictest definition, but
Sure,
but
yeah.
it was not this.
Yeah, yeah. And I think for an issue like this, the word I'm going to use is like denouement. Like this felt like, yes, we have a big hobgoblin fight, but I think all of the like big, high, heavy emotions was the previous issue. And this is really the sort of falling action, everything kind of coming together and resolving. And it does such a good job of checking back in on all the stories that it seeded that I think are going to form the backbone of the conversation that you and I are going to have today. Truly, the only one that I think that we didn't really check back in on is Itsy Bitsy,
Right.
Who maybe feels like she's kind of lost in the wind intentionally. I don't know. I do think that like the Hobgoblin fight here, as good as it is, I did miss a little bit of that like sort of wild card energy of Itsy Bitsy that she brought to the book. And so like I like the distinction of like how the battles played out differently across the two issues we've just read. But I found all of the sort of check-ins with everybody not only like well paced, but like meaningful. Like they're interesting check-ins with people that round out thematically and character-wise their arcs. And so I'm gonna maybe make. I don't even know if this is considered a bold statement, but I think this is short of Coming Home, maybe the most successful opening arc of a modern Amazing Spider-Man story, like in an era of opening arcs. Like I don't know that you would call even Stern, or Michelini, like that. Wouldn't call them opening arcs. I mean, there's like a 2-issue Chance story, or Spencer had the one issue, but then that led into the sort of like Spider and the Man separation thing, like
which wasn't great. We didn't love it.
No, it wasn't good.
Yeah.
I think people like to forget about that one when they're thinking about the early parts of the Spencer run. But we weren't big fans of that just from the get-go. While it had its joys, like Robbie Robertson in a vibrating chair. But to me, this was like just like as clean of a like triple that you could hit in the realm of Spider-Man comics. And I loved it for that.
Yeah, I mean, look, if we're talking history, I mean, maybe the only other example I would bring up would be like those first 10 issues of Superior, just in terms of like what that brought to the table, which I know like that might be a controversial choice in the world of internet Spider-Man fandom. But I'm never one to shy from controversy. But yeah, like in terms of like, a Spider-Man story where Peter Parker is truly the central figure, like I think this eclipses Zeb, it eclipses Nick, it eclipses Big Time. I think it eclipses Brand New Day. So yeah. It's not,
so maybe not quite as bold of a statement as I thought it was making,
like this is really good comics. I have to be honest, Dan, I've not been like really following closely what people are saying about this comic in the review world or the internet world right now, but like, so I'm not sure if we're gonna get a bunch of like Reddit hate for saying that, but like I stand by it. I think this is really good stuff right now.
I actually think that the internet has been much warmer on this than I mean, I'm also checked out, but from what I've heard, like people really buzzed about issue 4.
Yeah.
And for good reason, I think. And the fact that these books you pointed out to me are getting second printings, suggests that there is some, heat behind sales. They haven't quite dropped off.
Yeah.
After a number 1, we'll see. I don't know to believe anything, that I see in terms of like how Marvel sells stuff or numbers that are reported online. But I certainly haven't seen the hate for this. It could be that I just checked out of that community, for my own mental health.
I would say for the best.
But, yeah. But regardless of what other people think, we're really enjoying it, and I hope the listeners are too. Let's talk about some of the contents of this book.
Yeah.
And the big kind of center of this is this dazzling Hobgoblin fight. What'd you think of this? We've seen a lot of Hobgoblin fights, and you and I are certainly experts on this sort of thing. Where does this one sit for you? Is it more battle van, or is it Jason Massendale with a robot eye Hobgoblin.
Oh, no. I was immediately gonna compare this to, what is it, 250 or 251, the Ron Friends Tom DeFalco issue, where they're just like completely slugging it out. I mean, they're like this comic. I was kind of thinking about, as I was, putting together my recap for the episode and rereading the issue again. I was like, there's a lot of fight in this comic. You know what I mean? Like it is a prodigious amount of the comic, but like it doesn't feel like fluffy or bloated or any kind of a way. Like this thing is moving, and it's like, it's bringing in and bringing out other pieces on the board, as as kind of in and around the actual fisticuffs, which I think was really effective, just in terms of like Brian and Dr. Osmani and using the flashbacks throughout. Like I think I say this sentence every episode now, but like, I mean, Pepe Larraz is just like, my goodness, man. Like there has never been a better introduction to an artist on a Spider-Man book in my memory. Because you can't even count. You were just talking about Coming Home and JMS and JRJR, but like, hey, JRJR has had his history with the book at this point. I mean, probably since McFarlane. I'm gonna say that this is the biggest debut for an artist on this character since McFarlane. Is that a hot take, Dan? You tell me.
I don't think it's a hot take, and honestly, I'm already kind of like mourning his exit. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I had heard there are rumors going around now that like he may only be doing one other arc, and the DC has been trying to like poach him for some big events over there. And selfishly, I just want him to stay on this book forever. I could read his Spider-Man till the day I die. So yeah, it's visually dazzling. I don't think it has quite the sort of like zippy momentum of the previous issue, which is maybe intentional because Peter's not drugged out in this one.
Yeah.
Like he was in that one. Although I found the sort of like him sliding under stuff and bouncing off the walls like more dynamic and fun to read on the page, whereas this is much more of a like slobber knocker, like him trying to stop a guy from murdering other people. And I think both are equally can stand on their own 2 feet. But I and this one has got some great splashes of Spider-Man just wailing on the Hobgoblin. So yeah, I mean, it's really great. And I wanted to point out too, because I kind of made fun of the Mark Bagley variant cover for this, that I thought it was like colored wrong.
Right.
Because Hobgoblin's wearing a blue shirt on it, and it looks very weird. And then I open this comic up, and Hobgoblin has like a brand new costume with a blue shirt and bandages around his wrist. It's kindred, Mark. I did think that the redesign of the costume looked cool, although I'm always going to be like, a sort of like true orange, origins guy for what I like from my Hobgoblin costumes. But I think Pepe Larraz has done no wrong in any of his redesigns so far. So I wanted to throw that out there, that the Hobgoblin looks cool, and I think it was well utilized. I do want to push back a little bit about Hobgoblin here in regard to Joe Kelly and how he has interpreted the character. I didn't bring it up last issue, but there's a moment where Hobgoblin makes a joke about stormtroopers and the aim of his hired help. And, like, I feel like I've never really thought of like Roderick Kingsley as like a joke cracking kind of goblin.
Yeah.
And I feel like Dan Slott really got that in when he reprised the character in his run. And I think the writing of Hobgoblin here is a little too Green Goblin-y for my writing. There's some nice moments like where Peter comments on like Hobby's ability to keep his ego in check, which is in line with the Kingsley that I know. Like, that's what made him so exciting to read, is that he isn't prone to the sort of delusions of grandeur of the Green Goblin.
Yeah, he's not totally mad. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But there is a level of jokiness here, which, like, again, I don't mind the writing like in the pages of the book, but it doesn't sound like Roderick Kingsley to me. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, Mark.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, like I think my adoration for the Hobgoblin over these past few comics has been more about the Hobgoblin from a visual standpoint. And I do think like the general scheme of the villain here is consistent and aligned with what we would normally expect from a Roderick Kingsley plot, certainly in the year 2025 at this point. You know what I mean? It's a good Hobgoblin plot that at least advances beyond, I'm just going to sell more supervillain personas, or, I'm going to use the Winkler device, on a couple other guys. You know what I mean? Like, I think that, this was a slick plot line for the Hobgoblin and a slick scheme, whatever you want to call it, for the Hobgoblin. But yeah, like the patter and the just the jokiness was very Joe Kelly. We could talk about some other Kellyisms as the comic goes along, but like, that's kind of, I don't want to say to be expected, but like it's, we're going to get like random pop culture references to Stormtroopers or Mario Kart, which, like I said, like at least was relevant by, hey, the Switch came out again, so it works. But like, if this comic is a year from now, it's kind of like, we're talking about Mario Kart again. Like, what is this? You know what I mean? Anyway, so
I'm okay with that even too, because it's referring to like their childhood in some way.
Sure.
And so like there is a bit of nostalgia in there, and like Stormtroopers is fairly ubiquitous, right? But it's just kind of like, I don't feel like Roderick Kingsley would be the guy to make that kind of comment.
Agreed.
Which is to say, not everybody has been very consistent about how the Hobgoblin is written, Roger Stern included. His version of Roderick Kingsley is two completely distinct people. The other thing that kind of like, again, none of this really just took away from the comic to me too much, but like, I feel like in the battle, you've got the Hobgoblin kind of laying out his scheme and having that conversation with Spider-Man that like really like, puts a fine point in it. And I felt like Joe Kelly already did the kind of clever work of doing it in the previous issue, where like the Hobgoblin was teasing Spider-Man about like how he couldn't figure it out. And here he's like, oh, you're smarter than I thought you were. Yes, that's what I'm doing, but I won't tell you my full plan.
Right.
And I just thought that we already covered that ground. And so for them to be having that discussion while they're fighting, I was like, okay. And then where he like finds out that like Spider-Man, is there to save the two scientists, he's like, well, now I'm really going to kill them and their death will be your fault.
Right.
Which, again, I don't feel like Roderick Kingsley would really care about that. He's just kind of there to get his bottom line done.
Well,
and so now he's just kind of saying the themes out loud, which like is fine, but like I don't think he needs to say it. It's better when it comes from Peter.
Right.
Because that's Peter's fear. And how does the Hobgoblin know that he's fearful about that?
Right. Well, nor does, I was going to say, like, where, like, that, why, how would the Hobgoblin know that Spider-Man has a trauma from not being able to, save the people closest to him? You know what I mean? Like, it like, that is like a meta commentary being inserted in the mouth of the villain of the issue, rather than, it actually being a sensible thing that they would say. Like, these are legitimate nitpicks and flaws of how the characters are driven here. I mean, at the same time, like, this whole sequence is a lot of fun. I mean, like, certainly when you have like a visual of like, I mean, Hobgoblin with the wings fully out, like in the webbing. I mean, like that like to me, that's just like, that's a highlight that, a visual highlight that we don't get very often in this book, in terms of, something you would see in a fight like this. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, not that I'm necessarily willing to overlook it completely, but you're like at the same time, like, yeah, but this is still fun and kind of cool
Yeah.
and well rendered.
I don't want to. I don't want to say, like, again. I started by saying it didn't. It doesn't really take away my enjoyment, but it's the little things like, like the Hobgoblin saying their deaths will be your fault.
Yeah.
Remove that from his mouth and put that in Peter's internal monologue, and it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. Oh my God, 2 more deaths on my head. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Yeah. And it would pay off the way he was feeling in the previous issue. But then you get something like the Hobgoblin. Like, first of all, I love the image of the mushroom being like blasted into the Hobgoblin's face, and then the trippy spider sequence is great. Look, say what you will about Kindred. The visuals of Kindred were great. And this is a like kind of grotesque, spider centipede, scary horror scene in that level. And I really enjoyed that. Then I loved Spidey's final line where he says, hallucinations, anxiety, I have something for that, and just decks him. Yeah. What a great moment.
I was about to say, I will not stand for this Kindred revisionism on this podcast. But let's talk about Brian a little bit, because I thought Brian was, he gets a fun moment here. Like I said earlier on, he comes with the assist for Spider-Man, but like I don't necessarily feel like it's like, him stealing the glory. You know what I mean? It's still Spider-Man's glory, but Brian, comes through in the clutch, and it like I said, and it pays off. The flashback, which we don't necessarily fully get fleshed out, but this flashback of like Peter, even though he's not supposed to be, friends with Brian anymore, coming to defend him anyway, which was kind of interesting. What did you think about everything with Brian in this issue?
I love everything about his return, and first of all, the look of it with that like glass hood, like Mr. Freeze style. I'm projecting a Mr. Mushroom villain here, which again I hope doesn't happen, but like it could very easily like happen. Why is he growing the bad mushrooms? But like that visual was cool with him coming out with like the mushroom on like a plate kind of thing with the gloves. That was great. I love the bit where Peter says like, oh, he never had a strong arm. And so the mushroom just plonks off of the Hobgoblin, and it needs Spider-Man's assist to deliver it, which I think is a direct nod to the fact that he got beat up in the past. Like he didn't have a strong enough arm to hold himself off there. I loved all of this, although I did find the flashback stuff kind of hard to read, or like difficult to piece together the sort of like timing of it. I mean, in issue 1, we got that single panel flashback where it looked like it was alluding to Peter having beaten up Brian. You have like Brian down on the ground, and he's talking to Peter as if Peter beat him up. And here we get like the reveal that that's not actually what happened. Some other kids beat Brian up, and Peter was there to support him, and I guess got beat up too. But I feel like I needed something a little more clarifying on what exactly happened there.
Yeah.
Like, he suggests that Peter showed up late, but then Peter's already like been beaten up. So like, did he show up late after Brian had already, after Brian had already been beaten up, and then he's fighting who? Is it the other members of the Freaktastic Four? Is it a random other gang? Maybe it doesn't matter, but I feel like if I had just the tiniest bit more information on that, it would have made the sort of redemption of Brian in the present more clear for me. So I could tie the emotional stakes of that together. I don't know. Maybe I'm like over focusing on what the specific details of it are. But it's so broken up in memory in the past. I don't even really want to revisit it in future stories to get more clarification, because I don't think that would be the appropriate place for it. I feel like this was the place to tell us okay, so Peter was with Aunt May. They had a healing moment in the bathroom. But then what? He heard that Brian was getting beaten up and ran to support him and made that choice to go out there and help him. I guess I just I don't understand the interiority of what's going on there for those characters in that moment. And so it made it just like a hair more difficult to make that connection to the present for me.
Yeah, it's very unclear. I think the takeaway we're supposed to get is, Peter kind of has Brian's back for perpetuity, but like, again, and look, we don't know what's coming in the next arc, but there is still a lot of unexplained story going on between Peter and Brian and what this all means. So, let's wait and see. I think we can fairly say that right now, frankly, because things seem to be getting paid off and not just dropped and forgotten. But put a pin in this, because if it does get dropped and forgotten, that's kind of the sign of the old new, whatever you want to call it, Spider-Man ways of comic storytelling. But like, yeah, we need a little bit more here to be fleshed out to truly get the impact of this moment. But like, as of right now, it's just like, hey, trust us. There's more going on here between these two characters. Source, trust me, bro.
I don't even really need to revisit whatever this incident is. Yes, I would love to learn more about their relationship.
No, but I think like early on in this arc, it was established, like we had that scene where like Peter was like, hey, remember my friend Brian? And May's like, yes. And like, okay, you could just say like the drinking incident was enough, but I feel like there's more to it than that. Like if it's just that, Peter was acting a fool, but like, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like we need to see a little bit more about like what was going on with Peter and Brian and the others in the group, and why like the mere mention of his name was like this like moment of dread from Aunt May. I don't know. Like I'm asking for too much here.
I feel both ways about this. I would love to see it developed more. Like, I think there's a lot of rich potential there. And I don't think every arc should be this deep delving into middle school Peter, because I think then it will become a gimmick that gets very tired. But I'm also okay if this is the end of that particular, like if the beer moment is the reason Aunt May cringed, I'm okay with it. But I agree with you. I think there's an opportunity to do more.
What I would say is, yes, I don't necessarily need like middle school Peter for the entirety of Volume 7, but I feel like as long as like Brian is going to be a central character, if we still have like, in my mind, legitimate unanswered questions about his origins, if you will, in this world, I think we're kind of obligated to explain that. I don't know. Like,
and one of those things is,
I want to see it. That's my thing. Like, I don't need like issues and issues and issues dedicated to it, but I need a little bit more exposition about this relationship and this person as a teenager and what it all means right now.
And I agree with that. One of the things I'd love to see more of is like, I feel like we got some resolution with Peter in regards to like how he feels about his aunt and uncle as parents within this arc.
Right.
But Brian's is still very much out there, right? Like we got all this information about his dad who wanted him to go into plumbing, and, the sort of like, maybe he there's a sort of like, I'll show them, I'll, excel in science or whatever. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to understand like what that journey was like for Brian. Like, even if it goes like a sort of like Clash sort of route, where it's like, here's a mirror parallel of Peter that, because he didn't have the sort of supportive, always loving Aunt May, went a different route, but nevertheless ended up in the same place. And what are the scars and baggage that come with that? It is a very rich territory that, I agree, would be neat to explore. I think we learn a little bit more about like Peter's life at Rand, and especially Dr. OM or OS, I guess as they call her, in this book, specifically that she has stepkids that she's caring for. There's a text exchange that she has with it says step spawn, so I'm guessing that is a stepchild. And we got the previous idea that she has a track record of showing up late to work for some reason. And I'm okay with that answer being as benign as like she's juggling a lot of things, stepchildren,
Right.
so on and so forth. But to me, it was worth noting because like in the middle of an action scene, when you've got a character texting like their kid and your page space is as limited as it is in a comic like this,
Right.
like to me, it's suggesting it's doing it for a reason, and that we'll probably get a story that explores who this person is and their family life. And I'm interested in that. I think, again, we have an interesting supporting cast kind of coming into this book that feel like not only are they people, but they're people who have lives that are completely divorced from all of the insanity that, happens in a Spider-Man comic. And I think that only makes them richer that they're not all about Peter Parker.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I don't know if I have a ton to add to what's going on with Dr. OM in this. I mean, like, we'll
sure. It's a little moment.
Yeah. But it's good to add some depth to these tertiary characters for sure. Like I wouldn't even call them a supporting cast member. I mean, I guess by proxy she is supporting cast, but like it feels like she's kind of like supporting. So
sure, and she's not like Sajani.
No. All right, don't make me relitigate Sajani here, or whatever I used to call her, Sanjani or something or whatever.
Sanjani,
with the people who don't you know how to pronounce things, Mark? I'm like, I'm sorry.
She's Italian, Mark.
Sajani.
There you go. The other thing I had mentioned, I think a few episodes ago that like, I thought, oh, maybe like the sort of like cure for whatever it is that Roderick was doing would ultimately be monetized or by Rand, and that could be how Peter contributed. And it seems like that's not the case. By the end of this issue, although there is assertion that like that that drug has already been on the market for 2 years. But, so I don't think we really truly know quite yet what Peter is offering to Rand and will be doing there like week to week, so to speak. Except that we know that he seems to have survived another day because his like drug use is now public enough that Aunt May knows about it and gets him out of that pickle too. Anyway, and then the last question I have is like, why does Rand Enterprises have escape tubes built into it? Is this New York City in the Marvel Universe finally wising up to the nature of their existence? I don't know. Maybe you know something about escape tubes in New York that I don't know, Mark, given that you have a strong backing in New York infrastructure. But
I don't think this is part of swaggy Mayor Adams' administration. I mean, maybe this is preemptive Mayor Cuomo infrastructure. I don't know, but no, I have no insights on escape tubes except there are escape tubes in Rand Enterprises. So there you go.
Very strange. All right, let's talk about Norman Osborn, a sort of other, major supporting cast character here of the sort of the man in the chair variety. You made a joke that Peter has taken up your hobby of recapping in this issue, and when he checks in with Norman Osborn, did this scene stand out to you in any way? It's a sort of like discussion of the sort of like high level mechanics of what these plans might be as offered by a former supervillain.
I mean, sure. I mean, it certainly does accomplish that. I mean, like, I have not been a stranger to the fact that I don't quite fully get what Norman Osborn is doing right now. You know what I mean? Like, it's very much what he was in early volume 6, but I feel like we've kind of moved past that, but now we haven't. And and then it's this commentary on Peter being like, yeah, you kind of sound like a lunatic, and we're all just like standing there being like, is he going to become a lunatic again in time for a major issue? Say, to quote you, Dan, issue 1000. I don't know. What's your take on Norman here?
I mean, I think they're definitely playing with that. Now, whether they're playing with that to have fun is one thing, and whether they're playing with that to go somewhere or something else. And obviously I've said on every issue review that I really don't want it to go that direct, like back to formula, so to speak. Although I know it's inevitable. You don't leave a character like Green Goblin on the table for 20 years like they did in the past. That's just not the world that we live in anymore, where you have to drive comic book sales by doing a major villain thing, as much as I don't want it. The staging of this too. I mean, it's like him sitting silhouetted in darkness with his fire.
Yeah.
He gets a little laugh, like a in there. Like it's all being done intentionally to trigger us.
Yeah.
To be like, they're going to do this again. Like, and I don't know. Maybe it's like through the looking glass enough that we're like, we don't know if like we're being trolled or if they're being sincere, at this point anymore. Like, what's the difference between like a great Spider-Man comic and an accidentally great Spider-Man comic?
Right.
You know what I mean? But it makes me nervous every time to show up, and not for the reasons that like perhaps they think they're making us nervous. Mostly because I don't want it for meta reasons rather than narrative reasons. But other than that, like just on the page, it's harmless and interesting. Like I liked like his sort of breakdown of like, hey, like to have the drug that cures this, epidemic sitting on the store shelves innocuously for 2 years, ready to be profited off of by someone that could, invent something that could only be cured by it, is a sort of like insider trading, genius that like even Norman thinks is beyond Roderick Kingsley.
Yeah.
So then if he does, either Roderick has gotten a real level up in terms of his scheming, or there's somebody else behind, pushing him into this realm of work, and infiltrating the FBI, which is also a part of the story. And so I think that's interesting insight from Norman, which then gets me thinking like, okay, who is on the other end of the pharmaceutical company that would be doing something like this? It's Cardiac. No. But I think all of that is interesting. And then I also like Norman's assertion that like, hey, like cleaning up for the Hobgoblin is part of my atonement of my legacy, which I think Wells kind of dipped into a little bit. And I know that I've talked about it on the show as I think an interesting motive for Norman would be to take down the Hobgoblin,
right?
Because it's a truly living version of his sins, unleashed on the world. And I was just glad that it got lip service here, because I think it does fit with the sort of what we've been told about Norman's progression here. If you want to buy that he is got on a clean slate and trying to do good again. So I like that part of the scene too.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to, if we're truly trying to redeem Norman Osborn here, I think his connections to the Hobgoblin, whereas I feel like they were connected a lot back in like the 90s when, we were kind of, I'm thinking of like Goblins at the Gate and that storyline and stuff like that. I think it was, kind of, very essential to Norman's motivations, like to, I mean, of course, that was evil Norman. So it was getting rid of the Hobgoblin to kind of clear out the competition. But like, I think here, this is a good flip on that. And I again, this was interesting. I just want to know.
I want to know where you're going so I can enjoy it in the meantime.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Honestly, I wish this is something that they would do with J. Jonah Jameson. I know we've had stories in the past where Jonah, leaves his role at the Bugle because he feels guilty for some reason. But like, we've got good guy Jonah now. And like, if you can't figure out something to do with him, maybe he could do cleanup on the fly and, like all of the various Scorpion, like all the characters that he has inadvertently created to hunt down Spider-Man now that he knows the truth about Spider-Man. Like, if you're going to redeem all these characters, like maybe that's the path you can use them for. Like, I think there's like a ripe place to fix Jonah in this way too.
Yeah, I mean, although Jonah did step down as editor and is only publisher now, Dan. So anyway, sorry.
Big demotion. Yeah.
I know, for sure. Aunt May, I mean, we alluded to it earlier, but big tie together with her and the moment that we saw in the last issue and just kind of paying that off. And, like, I guess there is something a little cliched about the Peter and May relationship, but we also just really haven't gotten it. And if memory serves, Dan, I believe the word gumption was actually used in this comic, which, you've heard me talk about that scene all the way back in the Ditko Lee era of Amazing Spider-Man 18. Like, I love how Kelly is just not being afraid to mine that relationship here. I think it's great.
I don't know if that word was specifically used. I could be wrong, but she does say how stubborn she is.
Nah, I feel like gumption was used. I'm trying to remember where it was. It may not have been from her, but like Peter was like alluding to like his gumption or something, and I was like,
sure.
I was like, that's an intentional, because I picked up on it immediately, and I'm like, that's an intentional choice, and I think in a story that is focused so much on Peter and May that it's intentional, or maybe it was just a happy accident. Who knows?
Well, either way, to me, her calling herself stubborn at the end reminded me of that moment too. Like, it's a sort of, I don't give up. Parkers don't give up. Parkers have gumption, as you said. I loved this moment at the end. I in an issue full of strong punches and visuals, this was the moment that touched me the most. And it's one of those moments that I think has been missing from this book is the sort of tenderness of the relationships at the core of the book. And I love that it brought back the idea of like, and her outly saying like, I feel like there's something hidden from me and I'm worried that you're pushing me away. And Peter saying, I don't want to lose you. And I'm not I'm not going to push you away. And, to me, this is the sort of prelude you would write if you were building towards something like the conversation. And look, if they don't do that, fine. But like, I do think, one, I thought this was a really solid ending and growth in the sort of micro way you want to do when you're writing comics that go on for 1,000 issues, Yeah. But like, I don't want this to be the end of the focus on this moment because now Peter needs to do the work of not pushing her away. And again, whatever path he ends up taking, but it does seem like she directly alludes to the hidden stuff that we're moving towards a conversation moment and the intentional revealing of his identity to Aunt May, which frankly is not something I think we've gotten on the page before. Like, the conversation, she discovers it in ASM 400. She says she's known, even if it was an actress with a bomb in her brain. But like, I think that there is still something, even if we've seen that moment before, to do here and our healing of a relationship that makes it more adult. And I don't think there's any way you can read these pages without thinking that might be where they're going with this. And I just thought this was so sweet, the way that he like tells her at the very end, "You're a great mom." And after she admits, like, I'm not your mother, this sort of like feeling on her part that she is in some way incomplete. And Peter allows her to heal herself by the end by calling her mom. I think we've gotten stuff like that before, but this was nevertheless touching.
Yeah, I guess we've gotten stuff like this before, but this feels like the most direct it's been in a while, for sure.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Agreed 100%. Do you want to give this thing a grade?
Sure. Yeah. I'm giving this one an A-. I think this is a absolutely strong start to a new run.
I am right there with you. I'm giving this an A-. I know that I gave the last issue a B+. and a lot of people loved it. This is one of those things where I'm like, I don't know if I necessarily liked this issue more than last one, but like I said, land the plane, and they did. So I'm gonna give it an A minus. So there you go.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, plane landed. I told myself, I'm like, as good as some of these issues are, I'm not writing a letter into the Spider office talking about how much I enjoyed this until I see that they can conclude a story, because we all know in my history of the show how easily hoodwinked I can be by jumping on board the hype train.
Well, right. But, maybe you should just write fewer letters, Dan. Okay.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's it too. Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of this episode, but we want to thank you, the listeners and viewers, for tuning in to this episode of The Amazing Spider Talk. This podcast exists because of the support of our listeners on Patreon, where for only $4.99 a month, the cost of a new comic, you can help support our show's existence while getting early episodes, including these reviews, the same week the comics release. Also includes the first 11 episodes of season 7 of our show, exclusive artwork, and a ton of other bonuses.
The 11 episodes of season 7, but we've only released 7 at this point, Mark. How crazy.
How can that be, Dan?
Well, we're very ahead. But if you value smart comics criticism and historical analysis, we hope you'll consider supporting us on Patreon. Yes, what we do on this show is admittedly niche, which means we need your support all the more, because we're doing this for a very niche audience. Where else are you going to get this kind of stuff? Still, if you find our Spider-Man commentary and community valuable, we can only continue doing what we do with your support on Patreon.
Thank you to everyone who supports us and our work. If you want to join their ranks, please go to amazingspidertalk.com and click the Patreon button to sign up to join our club.
So, Mark, until Spider-Man outs our show as an audio source of anxiety and all of our listeners turn off their playback to avoid it, what's our motto?
With great podcasts, there must also come the Amazing Spider Talk.